I suggested he eliminate the spinach. Guess what happened? His lifelong low back pain that he thought it was due to this bulging disc that I had because this Hurricane Andrew came to Miami and he had to move a tree away from his house because it fell on his house. And that's when he had that bulging disc and he was out for days after that. And he thought that that was what was causing his low back pain. And I'm sure, I mean, the scans are there. Like, yeah, the mechanical problem is there, but it's not enough. You know, you also need the inflammation to aggravate it.
Welcome to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and I have one of my friends with me today, Dr. Serena Zaldivar, who is an amazing doctor, an amazing advocate for the carnivore diet. And so we just wanted to get some information from her and maybe talk about the reverse series that she was just in, which is super exciting. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Serena. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too. So I wanted to talk about your story first so people can understand that the carnivore diet is so varied and so wide in the amount of people that it can help, because we talk about people with different kinds of health issues that it helps. And so I always like to start with your story and how you got started in the carnivore diet and what it means to you.
Oh, it's a long story, but to make it short, I've always struggled with so many issues, mainly acne and weight gain and depression and anxiety, mainly everything. And that led me to break away and start to lose respect for the traditional mainstream advice given by the medical system and the nutrition also world, because I am a trained, classically trained dietitian, and my doctorate is also similar in that field, right? So I first cleared my skin after exhausting all of the options that dermatologists gave me. They gave me this spironolactone for years, Accutane twice, which actually gave me cystic acne for the first time in my life while I was taking it. Yes. And antibiotics for 3 months, birth control pills, all the topicals, creams, gels. I mean, they knew nothing. They still don't know anything. Even when I came to Miami, because I went to school at the University of Miami for my PhD, and I would see the dermatologist at UM. And I remember once I asked this 72-year-old dermatologist who was prescribing me yet another round of some drug. And I asked him, what do you think about the paleo diet? He's like, what is a paleo? So that's where you start losing a lot of respect for that. And then eventually, the anxiety led me down a path of researching diets where I discovered keto. And then I realized that keto not only helps with mental clarity, because after the first 7 days on a keto diet, I felt like a light flip switch in my brain, and I was came back online. I didn't even realize I had brain fog until I stopped having that. And then I realized that it also helped with body composition, but then the sugar addiction and the binge eating disorder that I had developed starting around 14 years of age really just was still there. And every time I would have a binge session, really miserable, I'd be watching a Joe Rogan podcast at the same time while I'm having my cookies, and he'd be interviewing the Petersons or Paul Saladino or Sean Baker. And that's how I learned about this whole other crazy diet. And then, reading Dr. Stephen Gundry's Plant Paradox opened my eyes to even more issues. And then when my hubby, who the only plant food he ate was literally a bed of spinach on top of his meat, all he ate was meat with just some spinach without even salad dressing. He wouldn't even put salad dressing. And the only thing he struggled with was really terrible low back pain for as long as I knew him, to the point where we got to a point where I'm going to have to get that spinal surgery despite the risks. He really, really was trying not to get it, but it was just affecting his quality of life so much. We couldn't go on a 2-3 hour drive without his lower back killing him. He couldn't get enough sleep because it would hurt. He couldn't be staying in that position for so long to get enough sleep. So it was really bad. He couldn't, if we want to do a binge watching session, 2 movies back to back, he couldn't do that, So, and that's when I was reading about plant toxins in Stephen Gundry's book, and I suggested he eliminate the spinach. Guess what happened? His lifelong low back pain that he thought it was due to this bulging disc that I had because this Hurricane Andrew came to Miami and he had to move a tree away from his house because it fell on his house. And that's when he had that bulging disc and he was out for days after that. And he thought that that was what was causing his low back pain. And I'm sure, I mean, the scans are there. Like, yeah, the mechanical problem is there, but it's not enough. You know, you also need the inflammation to aggravate it. So imagine our surprise when we discovered it was the spinach, and removing the spinach cured the debilitating low back pain. Isn't that wild? So yeah, I mean,
Amazing.
things like that happen. It is. And then that's how I became a carnivore basically, but I was still, you know, I don't think I was fully aware of the extent of the addiction and how addictive foods were. And it's so funny because I did my doctoral dissertation on addiction, on sugar addiction, specifically chocolate addiction. Like I spent 5 years of my life learning everything I could on the addiction literature and, you know, writing them up. And I had to defend the dissertation. Like I knew it like the back of my hands. It was also the effective exercise on food addiction. And so I still was in denial though, up until right around I flew to Costa Rica to film the TV show on carnivore, the first ever carnivore diet TV show series called Reverse TV. And that was around the time, like end of December, beginning of January. That was when I think I really tackled addiction head on. And I understood that I cannot be dabbling with artificial sweeteners, zero, you know, sugar-free Gatorade and Quest bars. So, it's just, I don't have time. I'll just grab a Quest bar. It's like, no. And I think that all happened once I read the studies on heroin, on how the sweet taste, they used saccharin, which is an artificial sweetener. The sweet taste was proven in multiple studies to be far more addictive than heroin. I think that those studies, just finally reading them, because they came out after I had defended my dissertation. After I had written my literature review. So after I had completed the research on that component. When I did my literature review for the PhD, it was just the fact that, you know, sugar and sweet taste is more addictive than cocaine. But when I read those studies on heroin, and how the sweet taste is far more addictive than heroin, I think that shook me to my core. It was really a life-changing moment for me, for my clients, for the content that I created, and for everything that I've done. It was a real eureka moment that shook me to my core and fundamentally transformed everything.
Yeah, and the studies for that involved rats, so it's not humans, but it is a fact that they went back to the sugar tasting substance, regardless of what it was sweetened with, more than they went for the cocaine or the heroin.
Yes. There is not a single addictive molecule that has been proven to be addictive in rats that hasn't also been proven to be addictive in humans. And so that's really important to remember, right? It's also important to remember that when we look at the brain scans of overweight and obese individuals, they have the same pattern of dopamine and D2 receptor destruction in their brains, just like alcoholics, cocaine, meth, and heroin abusers. It's the same brain. It's the same damaged brain, right? And not only that, there is a correlation between your BMI, or how much body fat you have on you, and how little dopamine you have in your brain. The more body fat on you, the less dopamine. There's a very, very clear association between the two, right? Because the only way you're going to gain body fat is by increasing your addictive food consumption, right? Nobody's going to gain body fat by eating one more ribeye or one more chicken or one more salmon fillet. It's physically, mentally impossible. You can only gain body fat when you are a food addict. And the more that addiction takes hold, which we're seeing is happening all over the world, and especially in the United States, whereby 70% of us are overweight or obese, and the remaining 30% are equal addicts. Maybe they can't gain body fat as easily for other reasons, but they're equally as addicted. And we're seeing how everybody is just becoming more and more of a food addict, and the overweight and obesity rates are really tracking closely with that.
Yeah, and it's amazing how, and it took me a long time to realize what was happening, but it's amazing how when you cut out the sugary things and you eat lots and lots of meat, your brain actually changes. And most people don't associate that. But it makes perfect
Yes.
sense that there are higher rates of depression and anxiety in people that are obese or overweight.
Yes.
And
So are
people,
you depressed or are you an addict? That's
right,
really important to remember. It's like, nobody's surprised when a heroin junkie is also depressed. It's like, duh,
right,
you're an addict. Let's get
yep.
you sober. You'll be fine. But yet we don't think about that. It's like, oh, you're overweight or obese and depressed. Let me give you an antidepressant, as opposed to addressing the root cause of all your issues. The overweight,
Mhm.
the obesity, the depression, everything tracks down to the fact that you're an addict, a food addict, and you have to get sober.
Yeah, and people don't associate those things together, which is the problem. Just like people don't think that the food we eat is the fuel for our body. And if you eat garbage, you feel like garbage. People really don't get that if you clean up your diet, you'll start to feel better and your diseases will start to go away. Not 100% of the time, but pretty close to that. And it certainly is worth the try. Like if you have autoimmune diseases or you have neurological issues or you have eating disorders and you feel like you have literally tried everything and you're going to doctors and they want to medicate you or whatever, it certainly doesn't hurt to try to clean up your fuel source, because it makes perfect sense to people that if you put the wrong, like I have a Ford Expedition, if I put diesel fuel in it, it's not going to run, right? But nobody thinks anything about the fact that people that are eating Twinkies all day don't feel good, or and honestly, even people that eat salads all day. Like I see people at the grocery store and I see their carts. These people are trying. They are trying. Their carts are filled with fruits and vegetables and, chicken without the skin on it, chicken breast. These people are trying,
Yeah.
but they just have been given the wrong information on how it works, just like we all were, because I was there. I was vegan, I was vegetarian, I was an avid juicer. I know, right? And I was a binge eater. So when I wasn't doing those things, I was binging, which means that's not sustainable. But I have been carnivore for more than 2 years and have not had those binges. I mean, now that's not 100% true, because last week I made a keto cheesecake with a little bit of monk fruit sweetener in it, and I ate like an entire cheesecake in 2 days. Cheesecake. And so now I'm doing the lion diet, but not as a punishment for myself.
Yeah.
Instead, it is more of a reward. Like I deserve to feel better. I
Right.
deserve to fix the damage that I have done. Whereas in the past, for me, it was always like a punishment. You used to do that too, right? Like you would go on a binge and then you would starve yourself or something, right?
Oh, binge restrict cycles. Yeah. Oh, those are my teenage years. It was awful. And my weight shot up to the highest it's ever been. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
For
remember.
me, it lasted until I was 48, because I just turned 50 a couple of weeks ago. And for me, it lasted until I was 48, that cycle of binging and then starving myself. So it was about 37 years of that for me. The
Wow.
cycle just continued over and over again. But man,
Yeah.
I started carnivore and it just went away. And so many people can relate to that. And it's something people don't really talk about. People don't really talk about the food addiction part or the eating disorder part. I guess we do talk about the food addiction, but we don't talk about like serious eating disorders and the carnivore diet, being able to kind of fix those things.
Yeah. And eating disorders is really what the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and the food companies would love for you to believe in. Eating disorders don't exist. They're just a symptom of addiction, right? But
Mhm.
because nothing scares the food industry, which is $1 trillion industry. Nothing scares them more than the concept or the notion of food addiction. So given that they can spend all this money, given that they're literally like legal drug dealers, so it's easy for them to make money, because when you're a drug dealer, it's very easy to make money, right? And so they make that money, and then they take that money and they use it to manipulate the conversation, to manipulate the science. That's why they spend 11 times more on funding basic nutritional research compared to our NIH, National Institutes of Health, or so generally are the greatest, research funders. So they're not spending all this money for no reason, right? They're operating a business, and they have figured out that if they can get researchers to come out with studies from Ivy League universities or any kind of prestigious university, or any kind of just even like the quantity of the research as it goes up when it's industry funded. It's like, that's the end of the debate. It's like, oh, but this Harvard study showed this, like, end of discussion. It's like, oh, really? How about all of these shortcomings? How about all of the cherry picking that was involved in the study? How about the funders of the study? And we know, I mean, there is very clear data, scientific data, that shows that when a study is funded by the industry, the rates of it showing beneficial results for that industry goes up by like a phenomenal amount. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same way with pharmaceutical companies and their drug. Like the doctors that go on those all expense paid trips, for the seminars and for the learning and all of that, those doctors prescribe the drugs like 2 or 3 times as much as doctors who don't go on those trips. And so it's really all connected. I don't necessarily think there's some kind of big conspiracy between the pharmaceutical companies and the food companies and the FDA, but they're definitely in each other's pockets and causing problems for us.
It causes bias. And even the researchers, it's not that the researchers who are accepting the money from Coca-Cola, well, maybe not the ones that are accepting money from, but from like, Danone and the other companies that are a little bit less or a little bit more hidden bad foods, like the sugar-free yogurt and the flavored yogurt manufacturers, So the researchers that are accepting money from those food companies, they genuinely never had an issue with binge eating or sugar addiction, or maybe they don't have high enough standards for themselves. So looking average and operating in an average body is fine for them. So they never had enough incentive to do all the research that you and I have done, to spend thousands upon thousands of hours researching from books and scientific papers, interviews, and just audibles. I mean, the sheer amount of content that I ingest on a regular basis will make your brain explode. Why do I do that, right? I have reasons to do that. So a lot of people that don't have that incentive. And so it's enough what they learned in school and they just follow that, it's like rinse and repeat the same information. And so it's like they eat that way themselves, So yeah, why not get the money from those food companies to fund your study? That's how it happens, And those researchers become, they become like the preferred researchers that will always get the funding from those food companies. Eventually your reputation builds up and they know, those food companies know who's going to pump out the research the way they want them to. That's how it happens. Yeah.
It's really sad. And it's this endless cycle, and it keeps people from actually learning the truth. So you really do have to be your own advocate and do your own research. And if your doctor isn't giving you answers that sound like they're right, and your doctor isn't asking you, what kind of diet do you have? What do you eat? Do you exercise? If your doctor isn't asking you those questions before writing you a prescription, it's time to find a new doctor.
Fire your doctors, everybody.
That's right. Absolutely. So now what is your opinion of a high fat version of carnivore versus a regular carnivore, which is also high fat, but not, like for me, I find that at 50, I do better when I eat 80% fat or more. So do you have an opinion on how that works for different people of different ages?
I don't care too much about the macro as I care about how you're getting the food. Are you sticking with whole foods, right? Are you just focus on whole foods and don't separate the macros. It's like, I'm going to get, lean meat and then I'm going to dump butter on top. It's like, no, just get the fat, get the food that has the fat inherent in it, So choose higher, fattier cuts of meat like ribeyes, but not always at the same time. You can, have a little bit of ribeye with a little bit of salmon here and there. I think that is a much better approach. Whole foods carnivore is what I would recommend, as opposed to having numbers and a lot of times finding that you have to get a processed food like butter, because it is a processed food, and have to dump it on top to hit those numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So what does a normal day of eating look like for you right now?
Ribeyes, ground turkey a little bit, but for the most part, or ground beef burgers, eggs and bacon. I'm gonna have eggs and bacon for breakfast, for example, today. Salmon. I've neglected salmon a little bit, but I do think we do want to make an effort and eat a little bit more seafood. I think that might be important in a carnivore context. So I should be buying some salmon for this week and just getting back into that habit of having a few pieces of salmon a week. Rotisserie chicken. 2 days ago, we went to the Orlando theme parks, came back and got a, rotisserie chicken for dinner. Like pretty much that's it. It's very basic, very simple. And that's how we really get food freedom, as opposed to every day. It's like, what's on the menu today? You're like thinking about it the way we lived all our lives previously. So yeah, that you're not thinking about that.
Yeah, I absolutely love the simplicity of the carnivore diet. So now we know that you exercise because you stay in shape. So what would be, and it doesn't really have to be an exercise activity necessarily, but what is your favorite activity to go do?
Ooh, I love running. I have my treadmills right here next to me, and
Yeah.
I love the time I spend running because I'm also learning. I'm watching podcasts on twice the speed because YouTube, for whatever reason, doesn't let you speed it up more than that. They really need to level up. But I put it at the max speed. But you can train your brain to do that. I think that's a very important tip to share with everybody. And I love my time doing that. But at the same time, I have to say I also love the strength training, because I do that, every day. I run and I strength train. Some days a week I'll take off strength training, and maybe 1 day a week off running. And but yeah, I'm like training at a real intensity, and that's something that I'm also very, very focused on with my work with my coaching clients, because the intensity that is necessary, not just for fitness, but more importantly, I think for restoring dopamine and D2 receptor levels, so that you have higher operating baseline levels of dopamine and D2 receptors. You only get there by real intense training, the kind of training where you feel like I'm gonna die, or very close to that. And then the time under tension spent, the total number of minutes that you can accumulate feeling that way, the more that is, the more dopamine D2 receptor activation and creation you're creating. And it becomes a good addiction, in a way that every day you want to get those minutes in, because you start seeing how it is transforming your life, every aspect of your life, how your character gets stronger. You no longer take crap from nobody. Any kind of toxic relationship or interaction, and in the past you would have accepted or backed down from or not made a big deal out of, you have the energy and the strength and the resilience to go through that without feeling the stress. That's the beautiful part about dopamine. Dopamine is the anti-stress molecule. When you have high dopamine, you have low cortisol, and vice versa. So you want to live a stress-free life, you got to get that dopamine amount as high as you can, because that is how you really can negate any effect of cortisol. And so every aspect of your life, you start making more money because you're far more productive, your memory is sharper, you have mental clarity, you're creative. It's something I should come up with merch for that. You know how people say it's like, the earth revolves around the sun? Wrong. The earth revolves around dopamine.
Yeah.
Dopamine makes the world go round. Everything we do is to get that dopamine hit, that pleasure, that feeling of excitement and energy. And, so yeah, that's the kind of intensity that you need with the exercise to release more dopamine. And then once you start feeling the effects of dopamine, it's like, I want more of that, let's do more. And then you have higher and higher. It's like, and then you realize you're limitless. You are a limitless being. There is nothing in this world that we cannot have. Anything, like the craziest things, there is a method to get there, but you need a lot of dopamine to sustain the amount of time, effort, and resilience into, because you're going to have a lot of failures along the way to get there. Dopamine allows you to go the way.
Yeah. So now let's talk real quick, and this is our last thing. Let's talk about the Reverse series and what that was like, going to Costa Rica and meeting so many of the other doctors and being available in person more to help these guests with their health.
It was a really fun experience. I had high hopes for it, but it definitely even exceeded those expectations that I had set. Everybody was so kind, so nice, so knowledgeable, so much wisdom, and the energy was so positive. And just being asked to be part of the first ever TV show on a carnivore diet, it makes you feel a certain kind of way. And everybody is like, what you see is what you get, really. The way that you see them on the YouTube and that's how everybody is, so real, authentic, genuine people who want to help other people, and yeah, it was just so much fun. I wish I could. So I went there for I think 4 or 5 days, no, 4 days, and then because we filmed it over a span of 6 days. So I was there for 4 days, and then I had scheduled the cruise ahead of time. We didn't, because they changed the TV show day. When we're gonna film so many times. We had already booked a cruise, so that's why I I left it. So I wish I was there for those last 2 days as well. But other than that, it was fun. We stayed in the same Airbnb as Dr. Kiltz and Emily Harvo and Dennis. Dennis was one of the guests with us, and a bunch of other people too. Oh, and Anthony Chafee stayed in the same Airbnb, and his beautiful girlfriend, Elle. So yeah, so it was a lot of fun in the mornings, and then later in the evenings, like especially me and Dr. Kills, like every night we stay up to like midnight talking about glycation.
She's the best.
Rashes. It was hilarious. We had so much fun.
That's amazing. So if you guys haven't seen that yet, it is on Dr. Barry's YouTube channel. So go there and make sure you watch all 5 episodes of the Reverse series. It was really amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk with me, and we will have to do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Serena. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time here on the Carnivore Revolution.